Good evening. Stephen Mirasu, Wine Saves Lives. It's coming to you from the patio, Livermore, downtown Livermore. It's now 7:30, 1931, 7:30. Long day in the winery today with Beth and Aiden bottling magnums of three different wines. So we had bottled 750s. As I've talked before, bottling with a mobile bottling line. But because we do such a small volume of magnums and 3 liters and 5 liters and such, those are always hand done later on. And it's been much later on. A lot of stuff trying to get done. Where Beth and I are headed to, we have very good fortune to be headed to Burgundy on a river cruise at the end of the week for our club members. And trying to get as much stuff done between now and then as possible in the cellar. So working on blends of 2023 L'Autre Lineage, Premier Cabernet, all to be released next year, as well as I said before, bottling magnums, everything done by hand. So I'll put a couple pictures here before I post that just shows the team, Sarah also there for part of the bottling. It's one of those things that it's theoretically fun spending 6 hours bottling stuff, radios going, and we're drinking wine and stuff, which is amazing and always great fun. But being on cement at my advanced age for 6 hours, back a little sore. And I think the finest medicine in the world is a drink called the Bethy, which is mezcal and fresh lime juice, a little simple syrup, named for my lovely wife, and just beautiful right now. Out of a very oh so wonderful Nick and Nora glass. Yeah, whatever. Delicious, however. I got an email from someone who works in Livermore Valley about tasting notes. I had written a tasting note on a Cabernet, and it wasn't very clear. And I owe her an email, which I will send to her after I'm done recording this, about the answering the questions she had. And it really was just a function of me not being clear enough about putting a blend together after about a year in barrel and then aging the wine for another 6 months or so in barrel as a finished blend. So I owe that to her. But the only reason why I'm bringing this up is that I have a mostly hate relationship with tasting notes. I understand intuitively. I understand not even intuitively. I understand explicitly the value of those things, tasting notes. Tech sheets is probably more where I come down. I never like to tell people, and I really resent maybe too strong a word, although not too much too strong. Resent when somebody tells me in a tasting room the way I should perceive the wine that they're pouring for me, what I should taste, what flavors I should get, what aromas I should get. One of the great things about wine, and there are so many of them, but one of the fundamentally great things about wine is how, because it's an elixir all about aroma and flavor, and because everybody perceives aromas and flavors differently, why would you want to tell somebody how their journey is going to start and end? I want people to experience that journey themselves. That's one of those things that's magical about wine, is it's different for everybody. There's no wrong answer necessarily about what people are perceiving. Part of the challenge with wine, and I think one of the things that the tech note or tasting note is supposed to help people with, is to create a common language. We have common language to describe any number of things that makes what might be something totally subjective a lot more objective. But describing the color of orange to somebody, describing the way that perfectly ripe Cabernet Franc tastes, notwithstanding how it might taste in the Loire Valley versus Livermore Valley, it's a fool's errand and is a disservice to that journey of exploration that I think is fundamentally part of the joyfulness of wine. Is we should be, as an industry, we should be giving people a very round, a very inclusive way of experiencing a particular wine in my taste room. For instance, if you come in and taste Guillemette Vineyard Cabernet Franc, I'm going to tell you more about the story of the vineyard and why it's important and what it means to my family than I'm going to try to tell you about the red fruited aspect of this particular clone of Cab Franc versus another clone in the middle of the valley and on. I think that one thing that helps to bring people together is the stories that we tell each other, the telling people why things are important, why a particular wine is important, why a particular site is important, but in a way that's personal, in a way that's interesting, in a way that includes them. And that's usually through the senses, but it's through the senses in a way that is open as completely as possible to interpretation. My wife and I, we taste wine together every day, and we have a fundamentally different idea about what red fruit versus dark fruit versus black fruit means, or a number of other different kind of aspects, insider baseball aspects about how things are feeling, astringency, texture, all those kinds of things. But we, and my son is the same way. The three of us have a fundamental, not disagreement exactly, but we perceive things differently, and we're all right if that even comes into play, which it really ought not to. We all perceive things slightly differently, in some cases very differently, and that's okay. We want to get to a point where we can communicate effectively with each other so that when I say this thing is red fruited and it has a fair amount of tannin from mid palate to finish, and the acidity really comes at the end of that experience in the mouth, that they're understanding what I'm meaning. They don't need to agree. But if we can create a sense of continuity and a sense of this word means this thing and that word means that thing, then we have a way of communicating with each other that I think gets us further along that path of discovery and of knowing what it is that we're trying to accomplish from a winemaking standpoint in this particular case. And I think the same thing is true in the tasting room. When people say it's got 14 different fruit aromas and it's got 18 different textural things, that does nothing but occlude understanding. It does nothing but make it more difficult for people to say, oh, okay, I get what you mean. I understand. I'm what's rattling around in people's minds, especially inexperienced drinkers' minds, are all these things that I'm not getting. I don't get Marionberry or Alala berry or dried tobacco leaf from Virginia or whatever. All that bullshit is gets in the way. And so the taste, I have this visceral kind of not tasting note phobia necessarily, but I realize that unless I pull back a bit and say, I'm going to give you the bullet point facts about a site, and I'm going to try to tell you why I think that's meaningful on a piece of paper. And then when I get a chance to talk to you, I'm going to tell you more about, from a personal standpoint, what's meaningful about that. I love the details of wine as much as any other wine nerd, winemaker. And I think that they're fundamentally, crucially important in a lot of ways, but they're not the first thing that you should be talking about. It's you go, if you're going to major in physics in college, but you've never taken a physics course in high school, you don't start at you don't start with the 300 series. You start at the 100 series classes, right? You give people the kind of grounding, the bottom of the pyramid, the general information. And then you hint at the things that are important later on, or maybe important later on. And then if they want to dig more deeply, or if they're already more experienced, then you dive down as deeply as possible. As I've written before many times and have talked before, probably, wine is a bottomless thing. Every time you dive deeply into wine, especially really good wine, the more you learn. The more you learn about the wine, the more you learn about yourself, the more you learn about how you perceive things, the more connected you get to the people who've made those wines. And consequently, there's a lifetime of joy to be found with wine. And it could be a cursory understanding, a cursory desire to dive more deeply, and only, and this is gigantically important, only about just the pleasure it gives me at this moment, which is fine, which is absolutely fine. Or it can be what kind of rock, what the pH of the soil is, all those things that are important, but not urgent. What's urgent is joy. What's urgent is deliciousness. What's urgent is the ability to create a relationship with somebody or deepen a relationship with somebody that you already know. That's what's crucial. Anyway, I'm going to have another sip of my Bethy. I'm going to respond to that email. I'm going to think more deeply about tasting notes and how to do a better job with them. Drink something delicious. Doesn't always have to be wine necessarily. There's a lot of other beautiful things out there, but drink delicious wine too. Have a good evening. I'll talk to you soon. Stephen Mirasu, Wine Saves Lives. Oh.